we're going to start this puppy up. Clear, drop. And welcome back to building the Affordaplane. We are almost done. In part 49, we're going to tie up a few ends, so to speak, which includes the cable bracing for our tail. There's 4 cables that hold all the components in place, so we'll be putting those on, and a couple other things. So let's get started. When assembling your stabilizer back onto the fuselage, you may recall that we used these plastic tube support bushings, saddles as they're called, made out of plastic. Well, note that now that we have the fabric on, this is fine, but look at the back. If this were used on the back, this point would cut into the fabric. And it may look like we're doing that, but we're not. All you have to do is grind off this lip here. It's plastic, so it goes very quickly. Go to your grinder, your 3M wheel, and grind off that lip so that you are not digging into the fabric. And that is true also of the bottom. You can keep the front lip, but grind off the back. And on your elevator, we need to reattach the elevator horn. This will go on the bottom, but remember it's located where we had our hole drilled here and here. Of course, this will go underneath at those locations. So open these up either carefully with your drill bit, punch a hole and then open it up. You can also use a soldering iron and melt it, but make sure you find those holes first and then punch them or drill them through the fabric so we can reattach our horn before installing the elevator. Now we want to work on the bracing for our tail. Now, if you recall, on our horizontal stabilizer, we have a 3/16 hole at each back corner that goes all the way through. And if you've covered over the hole, then you can locate it with a pick and then a soldering iron to open up the fabric and go all the way through. Because what we're going to do is end up putting a tang like this that will allow us to run a cable up to the top of our vertical stabilizer. And at the very left top corner over there, you see we have our other attachment point here, where we'll put another tang and run the cable diagonally down to the horizontal stabilizer. So vertical stabilizer to horizontal stabilizer at the very corner. We're going to have a steel cable that keeps those two in perfect alignment on both sides and the bottom. So let's get started. Now for connecting the cables up to the bolts, we're going to use these stainless steel tangs. They don't have to be exactly this size. The holes should be at least 3/16. And then we want to bend them into roughly 45-degree angles. So I simply put this in a vise and pound it on it to get a 45-degree angle. Now we should say that you want your stabilizers, both the vertical and horizontal, permanently attached in their final position before rigging these cables. So this is how it's going to kind of look. We have a 3/16 bolt. Here's our tang bent to 45 degrees, and I got a couple washers underneath. The idea there, and this is optional, your choice, is that if your cable tends to be loose or become slightly slack, you have a little bit adjustment by simply pulling out a washer or two underneath, and that could take up some of the slack. So that's optional. And then the bolt has to be long enough to come down below where we'll have our other tang. Same situation, put a few washers underneath the tang if you so desire, because that one's going to go down to a connection point down here, which we'll look at in a moment. We don't want to put a nut on this bolt yet because we'll be taking these on and off as we rig the cables. Underneath the horizontal stabilizer, we have the tang attached to the forward bolt holding the tail spring on, and that holds the tangs for the bottom attachment. So I have two of them there, one going to each side. Now, each end of the cable is going to look like this. The cable, and we have our Nyco press on, and then we have the tang. And we're going to make this connection not over on the aircraft where it would be difficult to do our squeezing, but rather what I call on the bench, meaning we will take the cable over to your favorite location on the bench where it's easy to use. Here I have a vise sitting on a table. I have clamped my squeezer, my Nyco press pliers, wrench, squeezer, compressor. Don't know the exact name. It has slipped my mind, but the point is it's in the vise and makes it very easy for me to set this up, look at it carefully, and then squeeze it. And then open it up, make the other press. Remember, we need 3 presses for each one. But my point is, all of the cable connection ends will be made here, not on the plane. It's easy to make it here. It's difficult to carry this over and try and squeeze it while you're underneath the horizontal stabilizer. Because guess what the stabilizer is going to look like if you drop our good buddy on top of him. There goes your fabric work. So, one step at a time. Step number 1, cut a length of cable a few inches longer than you think you'll need and press on one tang. Now let's go install this and look what we have to do to make the other end. So I attached the tang right here. This is the bolt that goes through the fuselage bottom and the tail wheel. There's my tang, and I strung it up. And let's look at the other end now. And here's how we're going to set this. Get yourself a marker, and basically we're going to, I simply slip this through, slip my copper Nyco press on, and I'm going to pull this by hand and get it nice and tight. We don't want it drum tight, but we want it taut. And when you get it just right, the way you want it, you're going to come and put a mark across the 2 cables. And that mark is going to allow you to take this off and go compress this after you line up the 2 marks. Because if you compress it with your marks lined up, it'll be exactly the way it is you leave it now. So take your time and get this nice and firm. You can even use a little channel lock pliers, a vice grip pliers, to hold these together if you want, while you mark it and while you check it out and whatnot. But have all of your hardware in place. I have 2 washers up here, and that way we can get this just right. Then we'll take this off here and carry this up to our bench and press this on with our marks all lined up. And then we'll reinstall it. I took it up to the bench and swaged it. Here are my 2 marks. So I hope it fits. And of course, I'll cut off this piece here. And that came out nice. Here's the cable, if you can see that. And keep in mind, there is no perfect tension. This is the tension you want to shoot for. Because keep in mind, when you do the upper cable, you're going to be pulling it up, and that will add even more tension to it. So no drum tightness here, just taut. And as we do the rest of the cables, we can even take out more slack because it will pull up. Keep in mind too that that's why I added 2 washers down here. You could remove a washer or 2 and that would add a little more tightness to it. But nothing's critical here. We're just trying to keep everything from being loose so that it actually holds these surfaces from being able to wobble and everything. There's a lot of play in the system right now before everything's connected. But once we get all 4 cables in place, it's going to be nice how they hold everything in position and they share the strength as they're mounted to the fuselage. So I'm going to go build the other one on the other side so that after that's in place, then we just have the 2 on the top and then can adjust the tension all the way around. Now here I'm on the left side rigging the cable underneath the stabilizer. And I'll give you one little trick. Just remember, you didn't hear it from me, but if you put a full beer up on top of the elevator of the stabilizer while setting your tension, the beer deflects it just a little bit down so that when you set this up and mark it, by the time you've taken the beer off, when you reattach it, you'll get just a little more tautness back as it deflects back up just a little bit. Now, of course, you can't use a light beer, right? It's got to be a regular beer. Well, this one is now installed, and this is number 3. So our last one, if we make it tight, will draw up on all of the other cables because we got then all 4 going in a big circle. So when this one gets pulled tight, then everything becomes tight. So this is our last connection down at this end. And here we have all 4 cables on, and this is basically what you're after. It's not drum tight, but it's taut. So the idea is that all of the members can't sway because they have a cable. Same with this one here. And remember, if you're after a little more tightness, that's why we have 2 washers behind each tang. By simply removing a washer and putting it on the other side of the tang, you can do that up to 2 washers, that will force the cable to become even tighter. And to have the 2 washers at each of these locations, that's why we had 2 washers there while you made the cable, so that in the future you could take up any slack if you deemed appropriate or necessary. Now we're going to talk about rigging with cables between the wing and the rear fuselage. Let's take a look at the locations where we're going to attach these cables. Now, the first location we need to look at is the front spar and the strut in particular. So here's my left wing, here's the front spar, and on the other side of this bolt, let's take a look. And we see our metal tang attached to the upper bolt with 2 holes. That's because we're going to have 2 cables connecting from here. One is going to go forward towards the nose, and we'll look at that in a moment. And the other hole is going to have a cable that goes rearward back to the rear tail, and we'll look at that location. Here's an example of the tang I'm using, one of these stainless steel type here. Obviously these need to be 1/4 inch holes. If these aren't 1/4, we need to open them up because this will go through our strut bolt and then the other 2 for our cable tang, for our cable connections. Looking at our tail, here is the rear connection for those rigging cables. And here it is. We're sharing the bolt that holds on our stabilizer attach bracket. So here's a stainless steel tang with a hole, so we'll attach to that. And of course there's one on the other side. So we simply need to string a cable from here all the way up to our forward strut wing tang. And that's all we need to do. We need one on each side. So let's start with that first. So our first step is to put a slight angle on our tang and then assemble in one of the holes our wire cable with a thimble and nickel press and attach it to one end, and then we'll roll out the other end. Just like this, and we'll go ahead and swage this and then reinstall this on the fuselage at the rear. So I have reconnected the tang with our bend in it and our attached wire rope, and we're basically going to walk the wire rope up to the wing and then cut it when we get pretty close. So the other end is on this tang, the one with the 2 holes. I'm going to take the lower one, and basically we're going to feed the cable through the hole and get it all aligned and marked so that we can take it back down and crimp it. And here I have it temporarily set up. I'm going to mark it and then swage the end. And with this connection made, I'll now start a new wire cable from here heading towards the nose of the aircraft. And this is easy. We'll take this off while adding the new connection. And I've attached the other cable. Trim this off, and this one's going this way, so I can attach this and then work on attaching this at the nose of the aircraft. And here we are at the A gusset, the very nose of the plane, and I have a tab on top of the bolt. I put in a bolt long enough so that I could get a couple of washers behind here, and that will give us a wonderful method of tightening this cable that comes up to here. Now we're going to take the loose end of our cable, and it's going to go through here. I'll go ahead and tighten it up and then mark it as we did before, and then put on our appropriate hardware and swage it, and that will take care of this end of the cable. And here is our final construction. The tab seemed to find its natural home by rotating in that direction. And then if we follow the cable up, here's our junction. We'll look at the other side. And this cable, of course, goes to the back. And I have these cables taut, not drum tight, but definitely taut. Now, for the wing gap, we need to cover this, at least on the top. It's part of what makes the entire wing one wing and not two wings with two tips on it, where all the air pressures are going to do some crazy things. So we need to cover it. One suggestion I'm going to go with is a piece of Lexan. Now this is thin Lexan. It's only 30 thousandths, roughly 1/32nd of an inch. So whether you get one that's 1/32nd of an inch thick or 30-some thousandths, that's the right one. The minute you go to 1/8 of an inch or bigger, it's thicker, heavier, and probably a little too thick for this purpose. Anyhow, we're going to cut one widthwise. Now, I don't have enough right now to demonstrate this totally, but this one is about, let's say, 10 inches wide, 8 to 10 inches. I'm going to put that over the top so that it bridges both wings. And we need a little bit wider one here for that. This is just a sample piece. There we go. And so this will bridge it, and then also I'm going to have it cut out so that I can bring this forward, and it will go around the nose piece here and around the bolts so that I can actually bolt it down in front. In other words, I'm going to use a wider piece that hopefully makes it over to this bolt here and goes around the nut. And then I can use a washer and another nut on top of the remaining threads. We'll see how that goes, but basically we need to order up some Lexan, and I think this makes a wonderful gap seal. You don't have to paint it, it's clear, and when you're sitting in the seat, you get to look up and see what's above you. So we'll get this ordered up, the proper amount. We need at least 4 feet to go all the way back to our aileron control. We can't go any further back than that. And then about 1 foot to span across, maybe a little bit more. Ideally, it would be nice to span this nut here and this nut over here. So as I mentioned, we can make a big hole in it, place it over the nut completely, and then use a washer and another small nut to hold it securely in place at the leading edge. And then we'll use either Velcro going across the top and or an attachment like a bungee or something to hold it down to the tube from the inside. We'll see. We got to get our full piece though, but that's all. It's not going to be a big deal other than just trimming this so that it looks halfway nice and a little bit of Velcro. So I've ordered this at Amazon. You can get it at your local glass, a lot of glass stores, plastic stores carry it. I'm not near a big city, so it's actually cheaper for me to order it from Amazon and have it delivered to my door. I think for $6. I'd spend more than that in gas going picking this up. So no matter where you live, right, Amazon will bring it to you. I believe I ordered a 2 foot by 4 foot piece, 30 thousandths. From Amazon, one of their suppliers at Amazon. And there you have it. Now be sure to come back next time for our final conclusion, part number 50, where we're going to weigh the aircraft and see how we did weight-wise. Because basically, we are done with our construction. So I hope to see you then. Back to building.